We all know that language is constantly evolving, but we usually assume that such changes are for the worse. In the following presentation, Professor Li Wei from the Institute of Education at University College London questions this assumption with his new Chinglish challenge, showing how varieties of English that are often dismissed as at best amusing may in fact be clever, creative, and even subversive.
So to start with, I want to set the background why I'm talking about new Chinglish, and the bit new bit is really important, and I'll explain that in a minute. There is, I'm sure lots of you are aware of the public debates over the cost and benefits of multilingualism, both for society and for individuals. Now, those who are advocating the benefits for multilingualism quite often argue the more languages one knows, the better, and the more languages society has, the better. All languages are equal and therefore needs to be protected. These are strong ideological and political positions people take, and they also do extensive research to provide evidence to support these positions. The general assumption behind these arguments is that linguistic diversity is somehow under threat. So there is lots of public discussion about the fact that lots of languages are dying out. Some people would say, oh, there used to be, or there's still 3,000 different languages, or some people say 6,000, and they're fast disappearing. And in the next 50 to 100 years, maybe half of them will disappear. In the meantime, new varieties of languages are appearing all the time, emerging all the time. So that's something that really is of a great deal of interest to ordinary people in society. But how do we then square that with the argument that linguistic diversity is under threat? In reality, societies do not regard all languages as equal. Some languages are highly valued than others, and we all know that. Individuals also acquire different languages for very different purposes to different degrees. Nobody can possibly say, I'm bilingual in 2 languages and I know them equally well. That is just not true. You don't need that, and you can't possibly measure the languages in order to show that you somehow know the languages equally well. So there are people talking about truncated or mobile repertoires. And as I said earlier, new varieties of languages, any language, emerge all the time. We're also increasingly aware of the fact that communication in the 21st century is multimodal. We don't just communicate with the traditional speech and writing. We are using digital means and lots of other means to communicate. But that's actually not necessarily new. The digital technology might be new, but ways of communicating as human beings have always been multimodal. We use gestures, we use postures, we use gaze, eye contact, and various other things. So all of these are happening in the context of intensified contacts between people of different languages and between people of different cultures. So mobility is increasing on a global scale, and that's really an interesting fact of life in the 21st century. One of the key challenges of multilingualism in the 21st century is how to protect the identity and integrity of individual languages while recognizing and promoting the intensified context and diversity amongst them. We have to balance that out. We want to preserve and protect individual languages, the more the better, and we don't want anything to kind of disappear and die out. In the meantime, we know we're all in contact with other people. So how do we also promote that contact, and what do we do during the process of that intensity and diversity? At the individual level, language learners and users increasingly find themselves having to deal with the question, how do I express my own beliefs, values, and cultural traditions through a foreign language, a language that wasn't really my own? We kind of believe that English comes from a different cultural tradition, Chinese comes from a different tradition, and they represent different values and histories. Now, if I'm speaking English as I am now, which cultural tradition or what kind of values am I representing? And how am I going to convince people of, say, Chinese beliefs and values and the history and socialization and everything that I've grown up with in English to other English speakers? How do we do that? And that's quite a challenge to us. So that traditional association between language and culture and language and values is being re-examined in today's context of intensified mobility and contacts. So these are what I call post-multilingualism phenomena, post-multilingualism challenges. So it's not simply having more languages and having different languages side by side. It's really a post-multilingualism phenomena that we have to deal with. The traditional approaches to multilingualism, where societies are encouraged to protect and individuals are encouraged to learn different languages, somehow seem less adequate for the post-multilingualism challenges. And there are tensions in the discourse on linguistic diversity. Different languages are good, especially if they have names and labels. So, basically I've gone through a standardization process. But emerging varieties or idiolects, by definition, they are substandard or non-standard, and they're spoken by individuals and smaller communities, somehow are not so good. So you have this bias towards or in favor of more standard varieties and languages. So today I really want to concentrate on what I call new Chinglish, a creative and a subversive response to the post-multilingualism challenges in China and the New World Order. And a very basic definition of translanguaging is a dynamic process whereby multilingual language users mediate complex social and cognitive activities through strategic employment of multiple semiotic resources to act, to know, and to be. It's not a traditional definition of language. It's not even about structures. It's about the process, and it's about how people use multiple semiotic, modal, and linguistic resources. It is connected with other concepts like multimodality, multi-competence, and linguistic creativity and criticality as well. The translanguaging perspective highlights the creative dimension. I got into this because of my initial interest in linguistic creativity. Yeah? And linguistic creativity is a big thing in linguistic theory. Chomsky's theory of language started with his interest in linguistic creativity. Basically, he wanted to find a way of understanding how individuals can create infinite number of structures and expressions through presumably a finite number of rules. But that's a very specific way of approaching linguistic creativity or generated through structures. I'm more interested in how individuals create language on the spot, as it were. So the translanguaging perspective would highlight the creative dimension and the transformative, critical, and subversive potentials of new Chinglish. And language can be reconstructed as a site of conflict, trouble, as well as celebrating creativity. After 30 years, I was really amazed to see these new publications that you can get from Amazon or whatever it's called in China. You know, it's still kind of, you know, from Chinglish to English, that's the same. And if you look at the metaphors associated with Chinglish, you need to get rid of that, get rid of Chinglish and combat as if it's a disease or some sort of enemy. Yeah, and of course during the Beijing Olympics and the Shanghai Expo, there were official campaigns to eradicate any signs of Chinglish and try to standardize translation of Chinese menus, for example. And some people made a lot of money out of that. Really try to get rid of it. One of the previous professors of English in Hong Kong, University of Hong Kong, and former professor at Oxford, and in his inaugural speech, professorial speech in Hong Kong U, was talking about Canton English, and he actually called this the ugliest English to be heard. And I think it was a very unfortunate choice of words, because it immediately had strong reactions from the local people at the time, because it reminded this book, The Ugly Chinaman. The notion of Chinglish is historical. It's been in existence for a long time, for decades, generations, and dynasties. It had that unfortunate colonial connection. And these are some of the postcards that you can still see in museums. In the meantime, we see in the current and recent press a very different view of what's happening to the English language learning and teaching, and the fact that so many people are speaking English in China and Chinese-speaking environment, not just mainland China, but also Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and Singapore. So, for example, here, there is a report in political fact.com. China is or soon will be the largest English-speaking nation in the world. So the so-called native speakers of English are getting quite worried about that. And the fact that they speak English in a slightly different way. So Chinglish is now taking over. These are kind of examples how English is evolving into a language we may not even understand. I mean, they're really getting worried with the fact that it is changing. I don't know whether there has been such public reactions to Singaporean English or Indian English or South African English or even Australian English. These are new varieties, but somehow the reactions to Chinglish and the new rise of Chinglish has been very strong and extensive as well. And you see these books that you can buy at international airports. There was even a Tony Award-winning play on Broadway called Chinglish. Now, all of these had an overemphasis on the deficient, inferior, and peculiar forms compared to the native or standard English, and the apparent communication difficulties caused by ill forms. And it has been described as or posted as a subject of satire and contempt. Definitely, we don't want that, and it's just people are making fun of it all the time. And the anthropologist Eric Henry, a Canadian scholar, young scholar, made an interesting point in one of his articles. It's no coincidence that Chinglish is circulated for both humorous and prescriptive effect at the very time when Western economic domination on the world scene, especially in Asia, is ebbing. It's not a coincidence. There is a reason why some of the English press is getting a bit worried and getting increasingly negative towards the rise of Chinglish. But the new Chinglish I'm interested in is somewhat different, and I'll give you plenty of examples in a minute. The position I'm trying to make is that new Chinglish, as it were, is a deliberate, subversive creation of new forms of English with distinctive Chinese characters. And it serves multiple social and political and linguistic functions. It's not by total accident or bad learning that people somehow ended up using this variety. It is actually deliberately created by a generation of young people who are very, very culturally and politically aware. It is a response to the Post-Multilingualism Challenges to China. And the notions such as hybridity or heteroglossia, fluid and dynamic multilingualism really cannot adequately describe this phenomena. It's not just an object, it's a real phenomena. And it challenges the legitimacy and ownership of English of the Anglo-Saxon root. So what I'm going to show you is there are different varieties of New Chinglish. I'm going to talk a little bit about the context and the socio-cultural and political significance of New Chinglish as well. And all the data come from ethnographic investigation of both verbal and online interactions. There's some linguistic landscape data. We also did a questionnaire survey and interviews. I'm really, as I said earlier, approaching it through a translanguaging lens, highlighting the creative and critical dimensions of this post-multilingualism phenomena. So considering simultaneously the structural and cognitive complexities of linguistic multi-competence and the historical, political, and ideological sensitivities and impact of it. So different kinds of new Chinglish, from the old varieties of Chinglish to the new Chinglish that I'm concerned with. Just a quick going through of the different variations, but also a bit of the history. What I'm saying here is really there are many different aspects of Chinglish that we need to be aware of. The whole notion of Chinglish came out of Pidgin English, and some people call it Yellow English. There is a recent book called Yellow English, published by Hong Kong University Press, actually. Initially, it was a trade language or contact language, consisted of content words and very, very much simplified grammar as well. So here is actually a textbook teaching people how to speak Chinglish. Now, it kind of rhymes, but the best way to do this is to read it out in Ningbo accent, Ningbo dialect. So if you know Ningbo dialect, Andy Gao would be fine with this. You can read this really perfectly because this was created by a Ningbo speaker in Hong Kong. And of course, nowadays, this kind of trade Chinglish is still in existence. You can still hear it in all the shopping malls in Beijing, in Yiwu in particular. I mean, there's been a few surveys recently by students working in Yiwu. So you hear, come, look, yeah? You get a friend prize. And the number 155 is never said as 155, it's 155. And that's a Chinglish way of saying it. And the studies I mentioned of Chinglish used in the Silk Road market in Beijing and Yiwu are reported in the so-called Language Life in China reports. It's actually a government-sanctioned report, and I've been editing the English version for it. The other variety is China English. It's very much the kind of English that we were taught in that school, you know, all the kind of official way of expressing Chinese opinions and ideas. And nowadays, it's typically associated with the Xinhua News Agency website and China Daily. China Daily is slightly different because it goes through editorial processed by native speakers. This building, which is still there, is the Central Bureau for Translation. But it was the translation bureau for Marxism and Leninism kind of stuff, and also translating Mao's works into English. So this is the bureau that does it. It's still now, all the official documents or Xi Jinping's speeches in English and other languages approved, translated and approved by the staff in this bureau. And you see a current version of that. These are officially sanctioned slogans. They're not actually produced by anybody. They're actually produced by proper companies. The local councils and authorities approve that. You can't just put a sign yourself. These are, kind of. There is the learner variety now since the 80s. Actually, it's fairly recent. English has become the main school language, and there are 500 million learners of English, the largest English language learning population in the world. There's been a lot of discussion. Blommaert, for example, gave examples of this kind, using Chinglish as a commodity, selling things. They're usually rather bad translation. But of course, it shows the instrumental value to convey information, but also kind of decorative, ornamental value. And people like Zhang Mai actually talked about the aesthetics and the principle of cool. Of course, they are a result of over-reliance on machine translation and online dictionaries. Having said that, there are also studies that show this kind of Chinglish actually is very useful, is very positive. If you do a literary translation of some of the concepts in maths and other things using Chinglish, then actually even native speakers of English find it a lot easier to understand. So there is a science article that tells you an interesting argument there. The new Chinglish, I'm concerned, the new kind of translanguaged or translanguaging variety of English has been reconstituted and reappropriated by Chinese speakers of English through new media in particular. I've written for the popular press as well as more academic purposes on this. They have a rather complex intrinsic connections with the other varieties of Chinglish, but it also has its own distinctive varieties. First of all, there are new Chinglish with Chinese regional accents and flavors that are mainly comprehensible to native Chinese speakers, and I'll give you an example in a minute. There is the variety of new Chinglish that is reappropriated English words and phrases that have been assigned Chinese meaning, again, mainly comprehensible to native speakers of Chinese only. And there is what we call citizen Chinglish. It's not a misspelled or mispronounced words. And I'm going to show examples of all these three varieties. This is a new Chinglish. We know there are words and phrases that have been reappropriated from English to Chinese with a Chinese meaning. So again, native English speakers not knowing Chinese will not understand the actual meaning of it. The first one is, has nothing to do with the National Basketball Association, obviously. These are really interesting back translations. So I mean, the people who have created this know the historical association of the old variety of Chinglish, which was really a result of poor learning and back translation. But this is not. This is deliberately, and it's extensive. It's not just one or two odd phrases or sentences or words. You have a whole online dictionary, the websites, and this last one is really important because when Obama became the U.S. president, before his first state visit, there was a group of journalists, well, a large group of international press, really, landed up in Beijing, and they noticed this postcard created by an engineer. Actually, I have this. This is the postcard, yeah, with what they call the Obama image. It's all digitally enhanced, and then people in Hohai in Beijing, a rather interesting area, started selling these T-shirts as well as the postcards and some other souvenir. But the Beijing local authorities tried to ban this because they thought it would be offensive to the Americans, and it would be particularly offensive to Obama because of the mention of color. The word color. So it became really sensitive. The Beijing authorities really tried to ban it. But lo and behold, the day before Obama arrived, these images were in the American press, in the American newspapers and online website. Put up this, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it, and they did such a big advertising campaign for New Chinglish because the Americans suddenly realized, oh, this is really interesting, and they kind of guessed what it meant, but not quite know the origin of it, and things like that. So it's really quite creative and interesting. And the third variation or variety of this is net Chinglish. It's a deliberate, and this is the most interesting bit, a subversive creation of new forms of English to express a range of meanings and intentions, especially dissatisfaction with society, with the policies. And there are 500 million netizens in China, up to 200 million netizens simultaneously online. Nowhere in the world have so many people working online all the time. And this variety is really, translanguaging, as far as I can tell, is the only term that can describe it, because it really no other words can describe it. There is a Chinese equivalent of that, is net Chinese, basically using homophones to avoid online censors. The purpose is slightly different. The purpose is really to avoid censorship, whereas net Chinglish, they're not trying to avoid censorship. Nobody is censoring that, actually. Now, net English, as I say, isn't aimed at avoiding censorship. There aren't enough censors who understand English to do that. And most of the examples cannot be easily analyzed in the confines of individual language, either Chinese or English. You really need to know both. And they transcend language boundaries. They're really the best possible examples of translanguaging. So here is the list. And recently, Democrazy has been used many times after Trump's election success. So it's not just a kind of negative and critical of China or Chinese. This is not about that. It's not about one specific political system or anything. They use some of these words to describe what happened in the United States, in Taiwan, here in Hong Kong. Also, again, Democrazy, that one has been used to describe some of the things happening to Legico here, of course. That Z turn is really, really clever. I don't know whether you know when Hu Jintao used this phrase. We should avoid kind of turmoil in one of the political speeches, 不折腾. I think the interpreters kind of got stuck. Didn't know how to translate that because it wasn't expecting such a colloquial expression. And then immediately there was online debate. What's the best way of translating this? And then people offered hundreds of different versions of it. And the netizens created this beautiful translation, which is very close to pronunciation. Yeah, it also uses the letter shape to express. So there are so many different meanings that you can analyze that little phrase, Z turn. It needs to be read in the American pronunciation, Z turn in British English doesn't quite work. Yeah, I'm just going to say something in general. What these new varieties of Chinglish, new Chinglish, does. They simultaneously do a number of things. They show the rebellion against authorities, any authority. Yeah. They also show the expression of dissatisfaction. That's very clear. Yeah. So there's the subversive side. There is also the fun side. People are really enjoying this kind of creation. They really, really enjoy this kind of creation. It's entertainment in some sense by the bilingual speakers. You can clearly see they are fully aware of what's happening in society. So that socio-cultural awareness is very, very strong. And of course, it's the sheer brilliant creativity that's shown. I won't have time to go into the details of the social political context, but that's the value of this new Chinglish phenomena. It's a real phenomena, and it's big. It's still going. It's intensifying in many ways. If you look at the English websites or these funny bilingual websites, not just amongst youth, but a whole generation of people, the intensified nationalism and the new geopolitics and world order cannot be forgotten. This is Chinese are becoming really nationalistic even more than ever before. And the idea that we should have our own variety of English that the so-called native speakers of English won't be able to understand is just brilliant. They want that, and they want something that they can use. And they also show the growing dissatisfaction at all levels, and the kind of paradoxical situation not uncommon in post-modern societies. It represents a fight of individuals against a hegemony of any kind, imposition of power. But it is not just the imposition by the Chinese government, but also by any foreign sort of attempts as well, and the sense of nationalism and national pride and individual desire for freedom, power, and rights. So they are really good examples of the challenges of post-multilingualism. Yeah, multilingualism won't describe this kind of phenomena. It's a post-multilingualism phenomena. Again, I won't have the time to go into the policies the Chinese government is manipulating in language. There's lots of real investment politically in language and language policy, both in terms of promoting Putonghua worldwide as a global Chinese language, but also using language as a key negotiator, key factor in the cross-strait relations between Taiwan and mainland China. Therefore, you get the journal, that's Ma Ying-jeou, the former president, launching the complex full-character version of the same dictionary. Li Guangyu, when he was alive, invested hugely into that. And Li Ruihuan was the president of the China Political Consultative Committee, of course. And this, actually, there's a new edition called 全球华语大词典. It's a more comprehensive dictionary, only launched this year. It was published earlier this year, but launched for National Day. It was a big ceremony as well. And it was recognized by both sides of the Taiwan Strait as a way of enhancing common understanding of that. There is also huge coverage in the Western press, and these are the words, these are the kind of Chinese words that kind of got into the Oxford English Dictionary. And the Chinese government, Chinese press take real pride of the fact that these words have somehow got into English or become part of English. So, People's Daily is saying Chinglish is taking over the world, and there's some funny kind of pride into that. And there are some other examples of Chinglish there. And China does want to project a modern, sophisticated image. So both the current president and the prime minister on their visits to Hong Kong, now bear in mind, they regard Hong Kong very strictly as part of China. And in the past, Chinese political figures would never make a speech in a foreign language. But they did speak in Hong Kong University and some other events in English. They made formal speeches in English. They want to show their ability to make a formal speech in English. That is absolutely unprecedented. You know, it's actually politically and diplomatically not allowed. It's not acceptable. You cannot. In these formal situations, you don't make a speech in foreign languages. You have to go through an interpreter. But anyway, so that's an interesting kind of twist there. Yeah, again, that's the political context of it. But also, I think we should remind ourselves that we Chinese have a very strong and long historically rooted linguistic ideology or language ideology. We believe, the first emperor somehow unified our language. He definitely didn't. I mean, it's not a historical fact. His attempt was try to somehow create a writing system that would represent different varieties of Chinese to an extent. But, everybody is talking about somehow he standardized the Chinese, but he didn't. But it's part of that ideology and belief. So, I mean, the real challenges that China and the Chinese are facing in terms of post-multilingualism is how to protect the identity and integrity of individual languages, but especially Chinese, but also recognizing and promoting the fluidity of linguistic diversity, creativity, and contact, and how to express our own cultural values, Chinese values, through a language that is not traditionally associated with China or Chinese, others, usually enemies. So foreign language teaching is a very political thing, and that's why you have lots of critical applied linguistics work, because foreign language education typically involves language of the enemy or language of the rivals. You don't teach friends languages. So just look at the foreign languages involved in language education in China: Russian, English, Japanese. They're all languages of the enemy. They are not friends languages. And of course, in the United States and elsewhere, it's the Chinese, the Arabic. Again, they have an idea. We only need to learn the language of the enemy. Otherwise, there's no money involved either. So New Chinglish seems to be a response to the challenges of post-multilingualism. It simultaneously shows an increased awareness of the rise of China as a global power and taking pride in Chinese culture. It shows the modernity and aesthetics of cool, the metrolingualism that people talk about through this creation. It shows the rebellion against authorities, both Chinese and foreign, and any imposition of rules and standards. The young people who are really involved in this movement really fight against that. And it shows social consciousness and political awareness of the people who use this. And of course, it has the connectivity and imagination on a global scale. They know what's happening outside China. They're very well connected and informed. They're also into the fun of life. It shows the socializing and learning aspects of this. They're still creating and learning. And also the commodification of multilingualism as well. Just very quickly to draw some conclusions. So post-multilingualism is not about the coexistence or co-use of multiple languages. That's multilingualism. That's what multilingualism is about. And I'm trying to move things on a bit. It's about the dilemma of protecting individual languages, but also recognizing and promoting the context and diversity between languages. It's about finding ways of expressing one's own values through languages that are not traditionally our own. So, how am I going to do, represent my own political views and historical values and cultural awareness through languages that are really typically associated with other cultures. It's about how to deal with so-called substandard emerging varieties and idiolects, really. But in many ways, this is how a language begins. Yeah? All languages began in this way. And long term, it became a social movement accepted by a community, probably not only for political reasons. It has to have a lot of cultural usage as well, and then became a language. New Chinglish is a response to the post-multilingualism challenges in today's China, where a deep-rooted linguistic ideology and a rising nationalism are met with a desire for modernity and increasing dissatisfaction with the current social situation in China. A bad, ugly, counterfeit language that Chinglish was once described has been reclaimed as a creative and critical expression of multiple meanings, which simultaneously challenges the word dominance of English of the Anglo-Saxon root and the Chinese linguistic purism. The Chinese linguistic purism is very, very strong. And what these people are doing is not simply challenging the dominance of English, but also challenging our own Chinese traditions as well. It shows the creators' political and social sense and sensitivities. It's full of satirical and subversive potential. It actually is a running commentary on what's happening in China. If you monitor the website and the new words, the new creations appearing every other week or every other month, you know what's happening in China. Just by looking at these new expressions, something's got really seriously wrong there. Kind of information subtly seeps through this. It creates a translanguaging space where new identities, new subjectivities, and new ideologies are being constituted and reconstituted. It really is a post-multilingualism phenomena. Multilingualism itself won't be able to describe it, and it transcends language and languages, or the boundaries between languages. So it really is translanguaging at its best. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.